Darkness. Silence. A faint humming sound. Ethan Carter opened his eyes, but everything around him was blurry. His head hurt, and his body felt weightless, as if he were floating. Slowly, his vision cleared, and he saw metal walls surrounding him. Dim blue lights flickered along the edges of the room. The air smelled strange, like burnt wires, and something old, something forgotten. He tried to sit up, but his body lifted off the ground instead. His stomach twisted in panic. No gravity. His breath quickened. "Where am I?" he whispered. His voice echoed in the empty room. Memories rushed back. His school trip to Luna Station, the spaceship taking them to the Science Museum, his best friend Josh laughing beside him. Then there was a loud alarm, flashing red lights, and after that, nothing. Ethan reached for the nearest surface and pushed himself toward the wall. His fingers grasped onto a metal railing, and he pulled himself forward, trying to stay calm. He had seen videos about zero gravity before, but this was different. This was real. The room looked abandoned. Floating in the air were small objects, metallic tools, a broken screen, and something that looked like a helmet with an unfamiliar design. The walls had strange markings, symbols he didn't recognize. "Not a human ship," he muttered. The realization sent a chill down his spine. His heart pounded as he moved toward the door. A small control panel blinked red beside it. He reached out and tapped the screen. It flashed, and suddenly, a deep alien voice echoed through the room. "Salvar no Turash." Ethan jerked back, his eyes wide. He had no idea what it meant. The screen showed symbols, maybe words, maybe warnings. He tried tapping it again, but the voice repeated the same strange phrase. The door refused to open. Come on," Ethan muttered. Think. He took a deep breath and looked around for another way out. A vent, a broken panel, something. He spotted a small hatch on the far wall, slightly open. He kicked off the door and floated toward it. His hands grabbed the edges, and with some effort, he pushed it open wider. Beyond the hatch was a dark tunnel, barely big enough for him to fit through. Wires hung loosely, and small sparks flickered in the distance. It didn't look safe, but staying in this room wasn't an option. Ethan hesitated. "I don't have a choice, do I?" Swallowing his fear, he pulled himself inside. The tunnel was cold, and his hands trembled as he moved forward. The deeper he went, the quieter everything became. Then, suddenly, Thuti. A loud noise echoed from somewhere inside the ship. Ethan froze, his heartbeat thudding in his ears. Something else was here. He forced himself to move faster, gripping the walls of the tunnel and pulling himself along. After a few minutes, he reached another hatch. This one had a small round window. Peeking through, he saw a large control room filled with blinking lights and floating holograms. A bridge. Ethan's heart soared with hope. If this was the ship's bridge, maybe he could find a way to call for help. He pressed the panel beside the hatch. It buzzed, and the door slid open with a hiss. Taking a deep breath, he floated inside. The room was massive, with strange glowing screens everywhere. The chairs were too tall for humans, their designs sleek and curved. He could see an enormous viewport, revealing the endless void of space outside. Stars shimmered in the distance, but there was no planet, no space station, just emptiness. Then his eyes fell on the central control panel, a screen still active. Carefully, he floated toward it and reached out. The alien language appeared again, but this time, a familiar symbol caught his eye. A rotating globe icon, a universal sign for communication. Hope sparked in his chest. Maybe, just maybe, he could send a message. He tapped the icon. The screen flickered, and a robotic voice, different from before, spoke. VIR-7 online. Status: emergency. Life support at 24%. Power core unstable. Navigation locked. Ethan's stomach dropped. Life support failing. Navigation locked. He had no idea how long he had before the ship completely shut down. Taking a deep breath, he clenched his fists. "All right, Ethan, you got yourself into this mess. Now let's figure out how to get out." With that, he turned to the controls, ready to do whatever it took to survive. Ethan hovered in front of the glowing screen, his heart racing. The robotic voice had spoken in English this time, but its message filled him with fear. VIR-7 online. Status: emergency. Life support at 24%. Power core unstable. Navigation locked. Life support failing. That meant oxygen could run out at any time. Power core unstable. He didn't know exactly what that meant, but in every sci-fi movie he had ever seen, it usually ended with an explosion. Taking a deep breath, he tried to stay calm. Panicking wouldn't help. Ethan studied the control panel. Most of the words were in an alien language, but a few icons looked familiar. He saw a green circular symbol flashing near the life support alert. It reminded him of the air supply symbol from his school's space station tour. Maybe that was the control for oxygen. "All right," he muttered. "Let's see if I can fix this." He reached out and tapped the green icon. The screen flickered, and suddenly, a deep robotic voice spoke. "Authorization required." Ethan frowned. "Authorization? I don't have a password." He tapped again, but the same message repeated. The system needed a crew member's access code, and he was definitely not a crew member. His eyes darted around the bridge. There had to be another way. Maybe a backup system. A manual override. He pushed himself toward the main console, searching for anything useful. Floating in the air, he spotted a small metallic device. It looked like a data pad, similar to the tablets humans used, but with strange alien markings. Carefully, he grabbed it and pressed the screen. It flickered to life, showing a mix of symbols and faded text logs. He tapped one at random. The screen displayed a video. A tall, silver-skinned alien appeared, wearing a dark uniform with glowing blue lines. It had 4 eyes, each blinking in different directions, and its mouth moved as it spoke in a deep, serious tone. Ethan couldn't understand the words, but the tone sounded urgent. Was this a warning? A distress signal? Then something in the background caught his attention. A holographic crew badge appeared next to the alien, displaying an ID code. Ethan's eyes widened. That must be the authorization. He quickly memorized the symbols and floated back to the control panel. Taking a deep breath, he tapped the screen and entered the ID code using the alien keyboard. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, authorization accepted. Emergency life support stabilization in progress. Ethan let out a relieved sigh as he saw oxygen levels increasing on the screen. The ship wasn't fully repaired, but at least he wouldn't suffocate anytime soon. But that still left the other problem, the unstable power core. Ethan pulled up the next alert. The words were unreadable, but the diagram showed a flickering red energy source near the bottom of the ship. It looked like a reactor, and from the warning symbols, it was in bad shape. He needed to find a way to stabilize it, or this whole ship might break apart. Suddenly, thud, a loud metallic sound echoed through the ship. Ethan froze. His heart pounded in his chest. That wasn't the ship's usual noises. He turned his head toward the dark hallway leading out of the bridge. The sound had come from somewhere inside the ship. Something else was here. For a moment, he held his breath, listening. Silence. Maybe it was just a loose panel, or something shifting as the ship drifted. Then, thud, scratch. A slow, scraping noise echoed from the hallway. Ethan's blood turned cold. That didn't sound like metal shifting. That sounded like something moving. His mind raced. The video log had shown an alien, but there were no bodies on this ship. Where was the crew? What if something had happened to them? He needed to move. Now. Ethan scanned the bridge and spotted a small metal rod floating nearby. It looked like a tool, but in case of danger, It would have to work as a weapon. Gripping it tightly, he pushed himself toward the control panel. There had to be security cameras somewhere. If he could see what was in the hallway, he would know what he was dealing with. His fingers tapped the screen frantically. At first, nothing made sense. Then, after a few more taps, he found a grid of camera feeds. He cycled through them, searching for movement. Then he saw it. In one of the lower decks, something moved. It wasn't an alien crew member. It wasn't a robot. It was something else. The camera feed was glitchy, but Ethan could make out a dark, shifting figure, something crawling along the walls, its body sleek and metallic. It moved with an unnatural speed, disappearing into the shadows. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Whatever it wasn't human, and it definitely wasn't friendly. Suddenly, the bridge lights flickered. The air felt colder. A new warning appeared on the screen. Unidentified movement detected. Security override required. Ethan tightened his grip on the metal rod. The ship wasn't empty. And whatever was here, it was getting closer. Ethan's hands were shaking as he stared at the screen. Unidentified movement detected. Security override required. He swallowed hard. His fingers tightened around the metal rod he had found earlier. His heart pounded in his chest like a drum. Something was in the ship with him. He quickly switched through the security cameras, but the feed kept glitching. Whatever the creature was, it moved fast, disappearing into the shadows before the cameras could get a clear view. Ethan took a deep breath. Panicking wouldn't help. He needed to think. Step 1. Secure the bridge. He scanned the control panel. There had to be a way to lock the doors and keep whatever was out there from getting in. His eyes landed on a shield icon next to the security alert. It was flashing red, which probably meant the ship's defenses were down. Ethan tapped it. Authorization required. Again, he gritted his teeth. The life support system had needed a crew ID code. Maybe security needed the same thing. He floated over to the alien data pad he had found earlier. Flipping through the old logs, he searched for anything that looked like an override code. The screen showed lines of strange symbols, but Ethan noticed something familiar, a repeating pattern of numbers mixed with the symbols. It looked like a code. He memorized it and went back to the security panel. Holding his breath, he entered the sequence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, security override accepted. Locking bridge doors. A deep hissing sound filled the room as the doors sealed shut. Ethan let out a shaky breath. At least now, the creature couldn't get inside. But he wasn't safe yet. Step 2. Find a way to escape this ship. Ethan knew he couldn't stay here forever. The ship's power core was unstable, and now there was a creature hunting in the shadows. He needed to fix the ship and figure out how to get back home. His best chance was VIR-7, the ship's eye. If he could get it fully operational, maybe it could help him navigate or even send a distress signal. He floated back to the central console and tapped the AI interface. VIR-7 online. Critical system errors detected. Limited access available. Ethan frowned. Limited access. Why? A new screen popped up, showing damaged files and missing data sectors. The AI's main system was corrupted. It needed a manual repair. Ethan groaned. Great, so now I have to fix a broken eye too. He wasn't a computer genius, but his dad was a systems engineer. He had spent hours watching his father debug software and fix coding issues. Maybe, just maybe, he could do the same here. He searched the panel for anything that looked like a file system. After tapping a few buttons, he found a list of corrupted sectors marked in red. Some files were labeled with alien symbols, but others had universal coding terms like backup, core commands, and navigation data. He needed to restore the AI's missing data. Ethan tapped the backup sector, but a new message appeared. Restore failed. Files encrypted. Of course, he muttered. Nothing can ever be easy. He needed a way to bypass the encryption. His dad had once told him, A system is only as secure as its weakest point. That meant there had to be a loophole somewhere. Ethan glanced at the datapad again. If the crew had stored their ID codes in these logs, maybe they also stored passwords or security keys. He flipped through the old logs until he found something interesting. A message from one of the crew members. It had a series of numbers and letters that looked like a passcode. Ethan quickly typed it into the system. For a moment, the screen flickered. Then, decryption successful. I-core restoration in progress. A wave of relief washed over him. It had worked. The screen changed, and the robotic voice of VIR-7 returned, clearer this time. I-core restored. Limited functionality available. How may I assist you? Ethan grinned. Finally, some progress. Step 3. Get information. VIR-7. Ethan said, "What happened to this ship?" The screen flashed, and a new log appeared. A robotic voice explained. This vessel, the Valkyrie exploration ship Saltrin, was attacked by an unknown biomechanical entity. The crew attempted emergency containment but failed. The ship was abandoned. Ethan's stomach twisted. So, that means the crew is gone. Affirmative. No life signs detected. He swallowed hard. That creature had wiped out the entire crew. And now, it was still on board. Step 4. Plan an escape. VIR-7. Is the ship still operational? Negative. Primary power core is unstable. Navigation is offline. Communication systems are damaged. Ethan clenched his fists. If he wanted to get home, he had to do 3 things. Fix the power core. Restore navigation. Send a distress signal. He was just a 12-year-old kid, but he had no other choice. He had to do this alone. But before he could even start, Footy. A loud, heavy sound echoed through the ship. Then the lights flickered again. Ethan turned back to the security cameras. His blood ran cold. The creature was closer now. A new alert appeared on the screen. Intruder approaching bridge. Estimated arrival. 5 minutes. Ethan's heart pounded. 5 minutes. He had 5 minutes before it reached him. Okay, he whispered, gripping the metal rod. I need to move. Now. He pushed off the console, heading toward the nearest exit. If he was going to survive, he needed to act fast. Ethan's hands were sweating as he gripped the metal rod. The screen still flashed its warning. Intruder approaching bridge. Estimated arrival. 5 minutes. 5 minutes. That was all the time he had before whatever was out there reached him. His heart pounded. He had locked the bridge doors, but he had no idea if they could stop the creature. He took a deep breath. Think, Ethan. Think. Running wasn't an option, not yet. He needed to buy time. He turned back to the control panel. If he could find a way to delay the creature, he might have a chance to escape. His eyes scanned the screen. Security systems were still damaged, but maybe there was something else. Then he saw it. Emergency blast doors. Manual override available. His fingers flew across the screen as he activated the command. Somewhere in the ship, a deep clanking noise echoed, followed by the sound of heavy metal doors sliding shut. Ethan checked the cameras. The creature was moving through a narrow corridor. Right behind it, a massive door slammed shut. Intruder temporarily contained. He exhaled in relief. That bought me some time. But it wouldn't hold forever. Step 1. Delay the creature. Done. Now he had to fix the power core before the ship completely failed. He tapped on the AI screen. VIR-7, where's the power core? A map of the ship appeared. The core was located in the lower decks, near engineering. Ethan memorized the route. It wasn't too far, but the ship's zero gravity made movement tricky. All right, he muttered. Time to move. He took one last look at the security feed. The creature was still trapped behind the blast doors, but it was moving. Claws scraped against the metal, testing the door's strength. Ethan pushed off the console. floating toward the exit. He pressed the door panel, and with a soft hiss, it slid open. The hallway outside was dark. Emergency lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Ethan gripped the metal rod tighter. Every small noise made his heart race. He followed the ship's map, moving carefully through the corridors. The ship felt empty, like a ghost vessel. He couldn't stop thinking about the alien crew, the ones who had lived here before. What happened to them in their final moments? He didn't want to think about it. After a few minutes, he reached a large doorway marked with glowing symbols. The map showed this was the engineering bay. Ethan pressed the door panel. It didn't open. Seriously, he groaned. Another locked door. VIR-7's robotic voice spoke. Engineering bay requires clearance level Beta 6. Ethan sighed. He needed another crew ID. He checked the logs on the datapad, hoping for another access code. After flipping through a few files, he found one labeled Emergency Engineering Access. He entered the code into the panel. Access granted. The doors slid open with a low hiss. Inside, the engineering bay was a mess. Sparks flickered from broken consoles, and the smell of burnt metal filled the air. Large pipes ran along the walls, humming with energy. At the center of the room, the power core pulsed with a weak, flickering glow. Ethan floated toward the control console. He tapped the screen, and a new warning appeared. Core instability detected. Power output at 18%. If it dropped any lower, the ship would shut down completely. He scanned the options. There was a manual stabilization program, but it needed a system reboot, and reboots required. Core authorization needed. Ethan clenched his fists. Another locked system. But this time, he had an idea. Instead of looking for another ID code, he searched for a backdoor into the system. His dad had once told him that old systems sometimes had hidden bypasses. He tapped through the engineering logs. After a few tries, he found something interesting. A file labeled Emergency Core Override. Ethan opened it. A message popped up. Warning: this action may cause temporary power failure. He hesitated. A power failure meant no lights, no security systems, and no locked doors. The creature could break free. But he had no choice. If the ship lost power completely, he was dead anyway. Here goes nothing, he whispered. He pressed override. The power core flickered. The lights dimmed, then surged back on. The screen displayed a new message. Core stabilization in progress. Power output rising. Ethan grinned. It worked. But then, a loud alarm blared through the ship. His stomach dropped. What now? VIR-7's voice spoke. Warning: intruder containment failing. Ethan's eyes snapped to the security feed. The blast door was bending outward. Deep claw marks appeared on the metal as the creature ripped its way through. His blood ran cold. The door wasn't going to hold. Ethan pushed off the console, racing toward the exit. He had done what he could. The power core was stable, but now he had to get out of here before the creature found him. He floated into the hallway and sealed the engineering door behind him. The ship's emergency lights flashed red. The alarm continued blaring. Ethan knew what was coming. The creature was free, and now it was hunting him. Ethan's breath was quick and shallow as he floated through the dimly lit corridor. The warning alarms blared, their sharp sound bouncing off the spaceship's metal walls. He didn't need VIR-7 to tell him what was happening. He already knew. The creature was free. His heart pounded as he pushed off a nearby railing, launching himself forward in the zero-gravity environment. He needed to get away, fast. But where could he go? The bridge was too far. Engineering wasn't safe anymore. His mind raced through everything he had learned about the ship. There had to be a place where he could hide or set a trap. Suddenly, VIR-7's voice crackled in his earpiece. Warning: unidentified entity approaching. Distance: 50 meters. Ethan swallowed hard. 50 meters. That's too close. He had no time left. He glanced at the ship's map on his wrist console and spotted something. The maintenance ducts. Those tunnels ran through the entire ship. If he could get inside, maybe he could crawl through them and lose the creature. He quickly floated to a nearby panel and yanked it open. A dark, narrow tunnel stretched before him. Without hesitation, he pulled himself inside and slid the panel shut just as he heard a deep, scraping sound behind him. The creature was outside, moving through the corridor. It was hunting him. Ethan froze, barely daring to breathe. He could hear the slow, heavy movements. It was sniffing the air. His hands clenched into fists. He had to stay quiet. One wrong move, and it would find him. For a long, terrifying moment, there was only silence. Then, bang! The creature slammed into the wall right next to the panel. Ethan bit his lip, forcing himself not to scream. His whole body tensed, his heart pounding in his ears. It knows I'm close. The creature let out a deep, guttural sound, like a mix of metal scraping against metal. Then, after what felt like an eternity, it moved away. Ethan exhaled slowly. I need to keep moving. Carefully, he pulled himself forward through the narrow tunnel. The maintenance ducts were cramped and dark, but they were his only chance. He followed the map on his wrist console, heading toward the communications room. If he could reach it, maybe he could send a distress signal. A new problem. After crawling for what felt like forever, Ethan finally reached the end of the tunnel. He pressed his ear against the metal panel, listening. Silence. Slowly, he pushed the panel open and peeked out. The corridor was empty. He quickly floated out, closing the panel behind him. He was close to the communications room now. He pushed off the walls, gliding through the air. The door was just ahead. Then the lights flickered. His wrist console buzzed with a new alert. Warning. Intruder detected in Sector 3. Ethan's stomach dropped. That's where I am. He forced himself to move faster, slamming the console on the communications room door. The panel flashed red. Access denied. Security clearance required. Ethan groaned. Not again. He pulled out the alien data pad and searched for another crew ID code. His fingers trembled as he flipped through the files. The creature could be right behind him at any moment. Finally, he found one marked emergency access codes. He quickly typed it in. The panel flashed green. The door slid open, and Ethan shot inside. He smashed the lock button, sealing the door just as Thu did. Something heavy slammed against the door from the outside. Ethan stumbled back, his heart racing. The creature was right there. Sending the signal, he turned to the communication console and tapped the screen. The system booted up slowly, too slowly. Come on, he muttered. A new message appeared. Long-range communications offline. Manual repair required. Ethan's hope shattered. The transmitter was broken. He had come all this way, and it was useless. Thuti. The creature hit the door again. Cracky. A deep claw mark appeared on the metal. The door wasn't going to hold. Ethan's mind raced. There has to be another way. Then he saw it. An option on the screen. Short-range emergency beacon. Status. Online. It wasn't as strong as a long-range signal, but it might still reach a nearby ship. Ethan didn't hesitate. He hit activate. The screen flashed. Emergency distress signal sent. Awaiting response. Now he just had to wait. But he didn't have time. The door began to bend inward. A desperate escape. Ethan knew he had only seconds left. He looked around the room for another way out, and saw a small air vent above the consoles. It was just big enough for him to crawl through. He jumped up, grabbed the edge, and pulled himself inside just as. Crash. The door ripped apart, and the creature burst into the room. Ethan held his breath as he crawled deeper into the vent. Below him, the creature sniffed the air, searching for him. It let out a low, angry growl. For a moment, Ethan thought it was going to find him. But then, a new alert beeped on the main console. Incoming response detected. Ethan's eyes widened. Someone had received his signal. The creature let out a furious shriek, slamming its claws against the console in frustration. It knew what had happened. Help was coming. Ethan kept crawling, his heart pounding. He had done it. He had sent the signal. Now he just had to survive long enough for rescue to arrive. Ethan crawled through the narrow air vent, his breath coming in quick gasps. Below him, the creature let out an angry growl, its claws scraping against the broken door of the communications room. He had done it. He had sent the distress signal. Someone out there had received it, but rescue wouldn't arrive immediately. And the creature wasn't giving up. Ethan could hear it moving below, sniffing the air, searching for him. He stayed completely still, pressing his body against the cold metal vent. He didn't even breathe. Then, silence. Had it left? He slowly exhaled, inching forward, when, crash! The vent shook violently as something slammed into it from below. Ethan gasped, nearly losing his grip. He looked down through the small gaps in the metal. The creature was staring right at him, its glowing yellow eyes locked onto his. It knew exactly where he was. No, 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 Ethan whispered. The creature jumped, slamming into the vent again. The metal dented inward, making a horrible screeching sound. Ethan had to move. Fast. He pulled himself forward as quickly as possible, his hands shaking. The vent was tight, but he didn't care. He had to get away. Behind him, the creature kept attacking the vent, trying to rip it open. The entire tunnel rattled, and Ethan knew it wouldn't hold for long. He checked his wrist console. Where does this vent lead? A small map appeared, the escape pod bay. His eyes widened. That's it. If I can reach an escape pod, I can get off this ship. A desperate race. With renewed determination, Ethan pushed forward. The vent stretched for several meters, leading to a grate at the far end. Beyond it was a small maintenance corridor. He could make it, but the creature wasn't slowing down. Bang! The vent buckled under another powerful hit. Ethan felt the vibrations through his whole body. He had seconds left. He reached the grate and kicked it hard. It didn't move. Come on. He kicked again. Nothing. The metal behind him groaned as the creature's claws pierced through. It was breaking in. Ethan had no choice. He turned his body, raised his metal rod, and slammed it into the grate with everything he had. Crack! The grate snapped open, and Ethan fell out into the corridor. He hit the ground hard, rolling as he landed. The sudden gravity shift made him dizzy, but he didn't stop. He scrambled to his feet and ran. Behind him, he heard the vent collapse as the creature burst through. It let out a deafening roar, furious and hungry. Ethan sprinted down the corridor, his eyes locked on his wrist console. The escape pods were close, just 2 more turns. The escape pod bay. Ethan turned the final corner and burst into the escape pod bay. The room was large, with several small pods lined up along the walls. He ran to the nearest one and slammed his hand on the control panel. System initializing. Escape pod launching in 30 seconds. 30 seconds. That was too long. A deep growl echoed behind him. Ethan spun around, and there it was. The creature stood in the doorway, its massive claws scraping against the floor. Its yellow eyes burned with rage. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, the creature charged. Ethan dived to the side, barely avoiding its deadly claws. It slammed into the pod's door, denting the metal. Ethan scrambled to his feet and grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall. Think. What would Dad do? His dad always said, use your surroundings. Ethan looked around. Then he saw it. A control panel labeled Gravity Control, Manual Override. Without thinking, he sprinted toward it. The creature roared and leaped after him. Ethan reached the panel and slammed his fist on the button. Zero gravity chaos. Whoosh! The gravity in the room instantly shut off. Everything, Ethan, the escape pods, and even the creature, suddenly floated into the air. The creature snarled, flailing as it tried to grab onto something. Ethan, used to zero gravity by now, pushed off the wall and launched himself toward the pod. The creature clawed at him, but it missed. Ethan reached the pod door just in time. The countdown flashed. 5, 4, 3. Ethan pulled himself inside, grabbing the emergency handle. The creature howled in fury, pushing off the floating debris, trying to reach him. 2, 1. Ethan slammed the emergency eject button. Boom. The pod shot out of the ship, its thrusters igniting. Ethan was thrown back into his seat, the force pressing him against the cushion. Through the window, he saw the spaceship shrinking behind him. The creature had been seconds away from grabbing him. But he had made it. Drifting in space, Ethan gasped for air, his body shaking from adrenaline. He was safe, for now. The distress signal was sent. Help was coming. He glanced at his console. A small green light flashed. Incoming transmission. Rescue ship approaching. Estimated arrival. 20 minutes. Ethan let out a long, shaky breath. He had done it. He had survived. As he drifted through space, watching the endless stars around him, he allowed himself to finally relax. For the first time since waking up on that spaceship, he knew he was going home. Ethan drifted inside the escape pod, his heart still pounding from the narrow escape. His body felt weightless as he gazed out the small window into the endless darkness of space. The massive spaceship he had just escaped from looked tiny in the distance. He was alive. But was he safe? His wrist console blinked with an alert. Incoming transmission. Rescue ship approaching. Estimated arrival. 20 minutes. Relief flooded through him. Help was coming. But at the same time, doubt crept into his mind. Who sent the rescue ship? Was it human? Or something else? Ethan shook his head. He didn't have a choice. His oxygen levels were dropping, and the escape pod wouldn't last forever. He had to trust that the rescue was real. He took a deep breath and checked the pod's control screen. Everything seemed normal, except... Warning. Unidentified object detected. Ethan's stomach twisted. He turned his head and looked out the window. At first, he saw nothing but stars. Then, something moved. A shadow passed across the distant stars, growing larger. The rescue ship, or a trap. Ethan stared, his heart racing. A spaceship was approaching fast. It wasn't the same design as the one he had been trapped on. This one was sleek, dark, and unfamiliar. The console beeped again. Unknown vessel detected. Hailing frequency open. Ethan hesitated. Should he answer? Then, a voice crackled through the pod speaker. Survivor, do you copy? This is Captain Reynolds of the U.S. Horizon. We received your distress signal. Identify yourself. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. A human voice. He quickly pressed the button. This is Ethan Walker. I'm the only survivor. Please, you have to get me out of here. There was silence for a moment. Then, understood, Ethan. Stay calm. We are locking onto your signal now. Stand by. Ethan's shoulders sagged in relief. Real humans, real rescue. But then, bang! Something slammed against the escape pod. The entire pod shook violently. Ethan's blood ran cold. The creature. The final confrontation. He turned toward the rear hatch, and his worst fear came true. The creature wasn't dead. It had clung to the escape pod, hidden in the darkness of space, and now it was trying to break in. Ethan's mind raced. If it got inside, he was dead. He grabbed the emergency controls and activated the thrusters, trying to shake the creature off. Whoosh! The pod spun wildly, throwing Ethan against the walls. But the creature held on, its massive claws digging into the metal. The pod's control screen flashed. Structural integrity failing. Hull breach imminent. Ethan's hands trembled. Think, Ethan. Think. He looked at the manual override panel. There was one option left. The emergency airlock release. If he opened it, the sudden vacuum of space might suck the creature out. But there was a problem. He could get sucked out too. A risky plan. Ethan gritted his teeth. He had no choice. He grabbed the seatbelt harness, wrapping it around his waist and securing himself to the pod. Then he reached for the emergency lever. The creature roared, slamming its body against the hatch. The metal began to bend inward. Come on, Ethan whispered. With one final pull, he yanked the lever. Whoosh! The rear hatch exploded open. The force of decompression tore through the pod, sending objects flying into space. The creature screamed as the vacuum pulled it out. Its massive claws scraped against the walls, trying to hold on. Ethan clung to the harness, his body lifting off the seat, his vision blurring from the pressure. The creature's grip weakened, and then it was gone, sucked into the endless void of space. Ethan gasped, barely able to breathe. He reached for the emergency hatch control and hit the override button. The airlock sealed shut. He collapsed in his seat, his chest heaving. He had done it. The creature was gone. Home at last. A few minutes later, bright blue lights surrounded the escape pod. The U.S. horizon had arrived. A robotic voice spoke over the speaker. Docking sequence initiated. Please remain seated. Ethan let out a weak laugh. He had fought a monster, hacked an alien ship, and survived in space. And now, he was finally going home. The pod shook as the rescue ship pulled him in. The hatch opened, and light flooded the pod. Silhouettes of people appeared, humans. A man in a white uniform stepped forward. Ethan Walker. Ethan nodded, his voice hoarse. Yeah, that's me. The man smiled. Welcome back, kid. You're safe now. For the first time in days, Ethan truly believed it. He was safe. He was home.